This video was brought to you by Incogni. Norway is probably the closest thing you can get to an EU member state without actually being a member state. As a member of the European Economic Area, Norway is in the EU single market, and the two big parties in Norwegian politics, Labour and the Conservative Party, support accession. In fact, Norway's government has actually tried to join the EU or its predecessors 4 times in 1962, 1967, 1972 and 1994, only to be denied by Charles de Gaulle or by the Norwegian public at a referendum. However, polling suggests that support for accession has actually risen markedly, and last week the leader of Norway's opposition announced that she wanted to reapply. So in this video we thought we'd explain why Norway is edging closer to the EU, and whether it could actually join. The TLDR team and audience have ranked the most powerful people in the world to determine who is the most influential. Want to know who made the list? Pre-order a copy of our magazine, too long in order to find out. Click the link in the description to reserve your copy. So let's start with a quick history of Norway-EU relations. Norway's engagement with European integration began in 1960, when it joined the European Free Trade Association, or EFTA. At the time, EFTA was an alternative trade bloc for those European states that were unable or unwilling to join the European Economic Community, or EEC, the main predecessor to the EU. Originally, EFTA included 7 countries: Austria, Denmark, Norway, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. Now, at the time, these were known as the Outer 7, as opposed to the so-called Inner 6 that made up the EEC, namely Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. The Outer 7 all appreciated the benefits of deeper economic integration, but either weren't willing to join the EEC or saw EFTA as a stepping stone towards full accession. This was true of the UK, which expressed its intention to join the EEC in 1961. Originally, the Inner 6 seemed keen, so following British lead, Norway, Denmark, and Ireland applied to join alongside. However, in 1963, French President Charles de Gaulle vetoed this accession, both because de Gaulle worried that the UK would act as sort of a Trojan horse for American interests, and because he worried that enlargement would make it harder to pursue deeper integration. The same 4 tried again in 1967, but de Gaulle vetoed them again. De Gaulle finally resigned in 1969, and his successor, Georges Pompidou, was more open to enlargement, so the 4 applied again in the early 70s. Norway, Denmark, and Ireland all held referendums to secure popular consent, but while Denmark and Ireland voted yes, Norway narrowly voted no, with 46.5% in favour and 53.5% against. Now, this left Norway in EFTA, but in 1994, most of EFTA, including Norway, moved even closer to the EU by joining the European Economic Area, or EEA, which basically brought them into the EU single market. Again, this was widely understood as a stepping stone towards full membership, and on January 1st, 1995, Finland, Austria, and Sweden actually joined the EU. However, once again, Norway held a referendum but voted no, this time with 48% in favour and 52% against, leaving it in the EEA along with Liechtenstein and Iceland. Polls suggested that Norwegians remained split on this issue until really about 2010, but no government really wanted to bring it up, largely because coalition governments are the norm in Norway, and almost all of the minor parties oppose accession. Support for accession then cratered during the Eurozone crisis, both because the EU was beset by bitter infighting and because the EU economy was struggling. Throughout the 2010s, polls found that only about 20% of Norwegians wanted to join the EU, while 70% were against the idea. Norwegians were also worried that as one of the richest countries in Europe, accession would mean that Norway would have to bail out poorer countries. After Putin's invasion of Ukraine, however, support for joining the EU increased markedly, and polls in 2022 and 2023 found that about 30% of Norwegians were in favour of the idea, compared to about 55% against. And support has increased yet further in the past few months, with the most recent polling we could find from Norstat suggesting that 37% of Norwegians are in favour of joining the EU, compared to 43% who oppose the idea, implying a net support level of -6. While this is still obviously short of a majority, if current trends continue, there could plausibly be at least a plurality in favour of joining in the near future. And Norwegian politicians have noticed this swing. And last week, the leader of the opposition Conservatives told the Financial Times that we are by definition in favour of EU membership. If there comes a window to apply, we will apply. So why is support for joining the EU on the rise in Norway, to the extent that Norwegian politicians have started talking about it again? Well, it's presumably a reaction to Trump's apparent abandoning of Ukraine and his antagonistic attitude to Europe generally, which has pushed Europe closer together. But it's also because the EU is just doing more than usual, including developing an independent security policy. As an EEA member, Norway is basically already in the EU, albeit with some exemptions for politically sensitive areas like fishing. The trade-off for Norway has always been that it gets its exemptions, but it doesn't get a vote, or really any say in EU policy. In the past, this trade-off was apparently worth it, but as the EU transitions from a bureaucratic power into more of a geopolitical power, at least some Norwegians have decided it's more important that they have a say in how this happens. This might also be motivated by anxieties about Svalbard, a sparsely populated archipelago that's part of Norway, but that's located nearly 1,000 kilometers from Norway's northmost city of Tromsø. As part of a wider geopolitical battle in the Arctic, Russia has shown increasing interest in Svalbard, and last month accused Norway of militarizing the archipelago, creating the potential pretext for military action. With NATO's Article 5 in jeopardy, full membership of a more muscular EU might be Norway's best bet for deterring further Russian aggression. So, could Norway actually join the EU? Well, the incumbent Labour PM has ruled out restarting the debate on Norway's EU membership, so the Conservatives would probably have to win the next election, due in September. Until recently, this looked likely. The incumbent Labour Party had been steadily falling in the polls, and in January, the Labour-led coalition collapsed over disagreements relating to the new EU energy laws, which Norway is expected to adopt as a member of the EEA. However, since former NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg's return to cabinet, Labour have enjoyed somewhat of a resurgence, and are now ahead in the polls. Conversely, the Conservatives have slumped and are now both behind Labour and their prospective coalition partners, the centre-right Progress Party. And while Norway's accession would be technically doable, it would be politically contentious. While Norway would be well received by most member states, not least because it will be a net contributor to the EU budget, it risks being vetoed by more obstructionist members, and hastily accepting Norway would upset some long-term candidate countries. All in all, while Norway still looks unlikely to join in the immediate future, the odds are clearly rising. Now, as we've demonstrated in this video, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the world about politics and current affairs, often with few easy solutions. Unfortunately, this can be the case online too. There are all kinds of bad actors out there that want to try and use you to make a quick buck. Take, for instance, data brokers. They sell your data to businesses and marketing agencies, leading to more spam calls, texts, and emails. Or even worse, they can sell your data to even worse actors who can go on to use your identity. Some data brokers have even been charged with conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud for internationally supplying data lists of elderly and vulnerable people to scammers. Fortunately, today's sponsor Incogni can help to rectify this. They work on your behalf to request your personal data removal. They also deal with any objections, and to make sure that your personal information isn't just shared by the brokers again, they conduct repeated removal requests. And with their family and friends plan, they'll even do this for you and up to 3 of, well, your friends and family. So create an account with our link in the description, grant Incogni the ability to work on your behalf, and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, if you use our link, you'll get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. So thanks for checking it out, and thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video.